Hello, my name is Lisa Fohey. I'm the Director of Supply Chain at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, and this is part 2 of a series about combining the elements of change management and project management to drive program success. Let's start with a concept that was introduced by ACMP called the Strategic Readiness Assessment. The key question you should ask yourself to determine if you should do a readiness assessment is, will this project impact anyone? Okay, so that's a silly question because every project would, but I encourage you to do this readiness assessment for every project that you start. You're going to want to ask, you want to pull in your key stakeholders or maybe your subject matter experts and actually write down the answers to these questions. Why are you doing this project? What are your goals? Is your vision inspiring others to action? Is the project aligned with the organizational strategic plan? Do you know how success will be measured? Do you have a project champion? If you aren't able to answer these questions, you're probably not ready to move forward. And if you do move forward without those answers, you're less likely to get sustainable adoption. The 2 questions that I would ask to determine if you need to develop a sponsor engagement or stakeholder management program would be, 1, could the failure of this project make me, or more importantly, my boss, look bad? Or would the failure of this project derail another project? If the answer is yes to either of those, then I would strongly suggest that you line up a formal sponsor who shares your vision and identify the key stakeholders. Depending on the impact to each of those stakeholder groups, you're going to want to craft an effective communication plan. And some projects can be more complex than others in this regard. If everyone's in line with your vision, you can probably make your communication plan very informative. If your organization is risk adverse or change adverse, you're likely to have to craft every communication as a little mini cheerleading message. But either way, you're going to be more effective if you're crafting the communications based on who you know to be those key stakeholders to be. Smaller projects might not require a project manager, but initiatives that cross over multiple departments or that have multiple sub-plans associated with them will likely be more successful if you have someone driving that progress to the sub-plans. So if you need human resources and procurement and you're in a tight timeline and there's lots of things that could go wrong, then you probably want to assign someone to write a charter and keep everyone on task and make sure that it's carefully executed. That can certainly be someone on your team, but if you're lucky enough to have project managers in your organization, I would suggest that you take advantage of them. We're going to talk about resource management next, but I want to share this resource triangle with you first because it talks about the interrelationship between quality, cost, and time. Quality can refer to the actual functionality or usability of a product or service, or many projects it refers to the project complexity or the project scope. Once you've established baseline for quality, cost, and time in your project, any changes to one of them will impact at least one of the others, probably both. So for example, let's say you're 25% along on a project and your boss asks you to deliver the results weeks ahead of the original deadline. You're going to either need to throw resources at it, which is likely going to increase your costs, or you're going to have to alter the scope or the quality of the project. So I recommend that if you have uncertainty in any of these 3 areas, that you do a deeper dive in all 3 of them because the uncertain one can possibly derail the other 2. So let's start with scope. Does everyone agree with the boundaries of your project, of what's included and what isn't? If your scope isn't crystal clear, and especially if there are multiple agendas amongst your stakeholders, then you'll want to manage scope more carefully. Document your requirements and get a sign-off from your sponsors. I would also recommend that you plan for what to do if someone wants to change the scope once you get started. We call that a change management protocol. There should be a formal process to request the change, and then they should expect that the project team will review the impact that it would have on the other parameters before officially approving scope change. You might not need it, but having the change management plan sets the right expectations for the team. Nearly every project needs some level of time management because there's usually a due date. At the very least, you're going to want to have a list of the tasks with the people associated with that and a timeline that they need to deliver it. Even projects with some flexibility about the completion date will benefit from this, because without it, they tend to drag on and also get put behind other priorities. When was the last time one of your projects had unlimited funding? Not all projects have actual out-of-pocket cash costs, but those that do are usually on a budget. It might be as simple as documenting your costs and having your budget approved, but if there's uncertainty about the final bill, you're going to want to track your costs. If your deliverable is a service or a product that has specific functionality requirements, or if the completion of subsequent tasks is dependent on precedent tasks, then you're going to want to have a quality plan. For instance, if your plan depends on a successful software upgrade before coding can begin, then you're going to want to have some validation steps after the upgrade before you start the coders. If your work team is working on multiple priorities, or they could be diverted off your project, or if you need a very specific skill set, you may want to spend the time to craft a human resource plan, document your needs, and then get your sponsor to sign off on them. Risk management is another area where you should always take some time to think through. Even if it's as simple as pulling the stakeholders together or the subject matter experts to have a brainstorming session about what could go wrong, even if the result of the discussion is that it's not a risky project. If you deem the project is risky, then you want to invest in a mitigation plan. You want to know what your plan B is. Learning and development is an area that the change management group prioritizes, and it's one that can be overlooked. If your project success depends on new behavior, then you're going to want some form of a training plan. And don't forget to audit the quality of your training. Is everyone on the same page about what success means? Please don't take this for granted. When we were launching electronic end user requisitioning, I thought the metric of success was that we would no longer have paper requisitions. My boss didn't consider the project complete until I moved more of our spend from check requests to purchase orders. That would have been good to know at the front end. And finally, sustainability. This is the true measure of project success, if you ask me. The most frequent derailer of successful adoption is resistance to change. So you need to tackle that head on in your communication plan. And then develop expectations of the behavior, the future state, and have ways to audit that behavior. And then you need to follow through on the feedback, both positive and constructive. So to wrap it up, combining the principles of change management and project management gives you a list of 14 areas to explore for relevancy to your project. I would recommend that at a very bare minimum, you look at these 6 areas and craft an action plan for each of these 6. So make sure your project is aligned to your organizational priorities, that you have a vision that inspires both your stakeholders and sponsors. Don't underestimate the power of a communication plan, and spend some time contemplating what could go wrong. Be certain of your success metrics that you'll be held accountable for, and invest in making the plan stick. Thank you for listening to our program about combining change management and project management principles to deliver quality projects.